Meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the October 6th meeting of the City of Raleigh Appearance Commission. My name is Adam Walters, and I am the Vice Chair of the Commission. The Raleigh Appearance Commission is a public body appointed by the City Council that exercises both advisory and quasi-judicial functions. The Appearance Commission's responsibilities relate to zoning and other land use matters, as well as the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the city. Today's agenda includes requests for design alternates from the city's Unified Development Ordinance. When hearing requests for design alternates, the Appearance Commission sits as a quasi-judicial body and conducts an evidentiary hearing on the request. That means it's like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this commission must make its decisions. The commission's decisions are constrained by the standards in the city's ordinance and the facts presented at the hearing. The Commission hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standards set forth in state law and the city's ordinance. The Commission must base its decisions upon competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. This meeting is open to the public and everyone is welcome to watch. However, participation in the evidentiary hearings is limited. Parties have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, the Commission needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. Before we begin the hearings, I'd like to remind applicants to keep your presentations brief, considering our heavy agenda for the evening. And it's my understanding that DA 15-2022 will be withdrawn from this meeting. We will now conduct the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda. We will now open evidentiary hearing for item DA 11-2022 on today's agenda, and I'd like to ask Daniel Stegall to introduce this hearing. Before you start, please confirm that you have been sworn in, which you have not. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you. So, good evening. I'm Daniel Stegall, Land Development Manager for the Planning and Development Department for the City of Raleigh. As you can see, we've got our agenda here. The first case is DA 11-2022 at 5100 Forestville Road in Buffalo Bend. This hearing was continued from September 1st, Appearance Commission meeting. The subject property, again, is located at 5100 Forestville Road at the southwest corner of Forestville Road and Buffalo Road. The property is zoned as commercial mixed use, 3 stories with conditional use, meaning it has zoning conditions. The Buffalo Bend project is proposing a shopping center, which consists of 4 general buildings for future retail and commercial uses. The applicant is requesting 6 design alternates related to transparency. The requests are to reduce the transparency on the north side of Building 1 and for relief from transparency for the east, south, and west sides of Building Number 1, as well as requests for relief for the south sides of Building 2 and 3. So the UDO defines how the transparency is calculated for each story of the building, including that 50% of the required ground story transparency must be located between 3 and 8 feet. Transparency is required for each side of the building facing a public street, and general buildings in the CX district are required to have a minimum 33% transparency on the ground story. Just a slide just to follow up some information with the general building type when it comes to transparency requirements. And here are the findings for transparency, which can be found in UDO section 1.5.9. Any questions for staff? Or you would like to have the applicant come in and present?
Thank you, Daniel. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of this request. 2 reminders to the applicant. Any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards. And please keep your presentation brief and directly relevant to the design alternate request.
Okay, good afternoon. My name's Isabel Maddox. I'm a land use attorney here in Raleigh. I'm here today representing Halverson Development, the developer of a public shopping center on Buffalo Road. There's a lot of excitement of that because there hasn't been a lot of grocery in that area. So even people who are somewhat not so sure about some of the development coming for the Buffalo corridor are really excited to get a grocery store. I'm here today with Carla Kassabaum. She's the developer with Harris Development. She's been a developer for over 10 years and is experienced in those matters. We were supposed to have Andy Patiak of McAdams, our engineer, here today. Unfortunately, yesterday, Andy was exposed to somebody who was diagnosed today with COVID, and he was going to come, but then he started feeling symptomatic today. I just heard about this like within the last hour, and we said, don't come. So Andy will not be here, but he has worked on this and helped Carla and me get this presentation together, and so I hope you will excuse us for not having him here today. We were here in September, and we discussed this pretty thoroughly. You guys asked for more, and we have been hard at work trying to get some stuff, some improvements to our case. And so what we want to bring today, we have added some features that I think add to both the transparency and the visual interest. And also, I think one of the main things we're going to do today is be able to show you in a better way what you're going to see from the street. We've got some good perspectives. Carla has worked many hours on getting these together, and I think they effectively show what will be seen from the pedestrian, from the motorists, yeah, a little bit, but you're driving by. But the pedestrian, the cyclist, the perspectives they'll see. So I've got a presentation here, and I'm trying not to duplicate. Just to go back one point. Okay, so when we came in September, I think you're okay with both sides of there are 3 buildings. And let me go to a slide here to get, let's see, reacquaint myself. Wait a minute. Daniel, where do I get to my presentation? Does it just keep scrolling down?
We can minimize this.
That looked like the first page, but then I thought I was on it. Okay, so if I go. Okay, there we go. They're buildings, 1, which is the Publix building, 2, which is some inline retail, and 3, which is another building, probably a restaurant. And I think when we came in September, you guys were okay with the 2 smaller buildings and also the sides of the Publix building. The issues that you had were on the front of the Publix and on the rear of the Publix. So that's what we've concentrated on today. And if you want to see more about the sides or those things that I think we pretty much went through before and you were okay with those, let me know, and I think we can get to those if we have to. Just in the interest of time, I do want to focus on a couple things. One, as we said the other day, there's a significant distance between the front of the building and Buffalo Road. In fact, and at the time we were estimating, we have about 550 or so feet to Buffalo Road. I'm going to pass out some pages that show measurements. These were prepared by our engineer.
Yeah, let's give them to the clerk and mark them.
Okay.
Here, if you want to hand them down, just so she can put a number on and pass it
These
around.
will also provide y'all a little code. Carla's going to go through some perspectives, and they have a letter coded thing to say where you were on the site, and she's showing you the picture that she's showing you. But I wanted to show these distances first, and they're measured here. They show a distance, a 570-foot distance from the front of Publix to Buffalo Road, and they show a distance of as much as 372 feet from the back to Timberfield Way, which wraps around from Buffalo and ties into Forestville. So that's Timberview here, like that. So just to get that clarity there. So your concerns, this is not advancing the way I usually do. Your concerns in September were, as I said, the north facade and the south facade. Those on the screen are the requests we made. But I'm going to show you what we've done here. That's just sort of a twilight view. Are we going to, Daniel? How am I?
Your bar's down here. Let's do this here.
But how do I get
May
that?
need to open it in a program outside the web page.
Yeah, I mean, oh, there you go. Now, how are you doing that?
You just put your cursor down here with a bar.
Oh, just that great. Okay, okay. So that's a sort of a twilight view, and the reason we showed it at sort of twilight because it gives you a little better view. What we've done is we've added some spandrel glass down in here. It's not transparent, but it's glass. It gives you sort of a feel of windows. Then we've backlit windows right here and there in these upper stories. Again, that doesn't actually satisfy the requirement because the transparency is between, most of it, you want it between 3 and 8 feet, but it just adds a little bit of, transparency or glass along that side. And so when we go to this is just not the way it normally is. So on the north, and we told you about this before, the things we believe mitigate our lack of compliance with the transparency requirement are we have multiple architectural elements, as you could see. We have gables, we have a lot of articulation, we have columns, we have dormers. We have probably at least 5 different colors. We have outdoor seating, we have different materials, we have brick, we have siding, we have precast, we have glass. And what we've done since the last meeting is we've added, and that says 10 windows. On the front, we've actually added 6. It depends on how you count those double windows as 1 or 2, but 6 if you count them as 1 window for a double window. So we've added, let's just say 6 windows there. And we've added the spandrel glass on the ground floor, and we've backlit the upper story windows. And I think we have graphics that are going to show you better the what it really looks like from a distance. This is not showing from a distance, but just showing you generally what that front facade looks like. And you can see with landscaping, it's a pleasant facade with, I think, lots of visual interest there with the different colors and materials and articulations. And then if you look at this first row here, this is the front facade. And unfortunately, the actual transparency doesn't show up really great on here. It's really kind of showing as black. But you can see the gables up here with the backlit windows, the spandrel down here. The outdoor seating doesn't show up real well, but that's right in this area, right here. And
pardon me, if I could offer some advice. If this PDF is opened in Acrobat or whichever original program, you would be able to zoom in to the locations you're highlighting in a better quality view.
I don't know. These were slides just sent in a PDF. I don't know whether we can do that
It's
or not.
just currently running from the browser page. So if it were running in full screen in whichever PDF program
Testing
usually.
my technological.
Yeah, no worries. I'm
capabilities.
just trying to offer assistance.
I hear you, and if it's doable, I think it's a great idea.
There is a full screen option by the top right corner. If you go under a little bit where the little cog symbol is in the full screen.
There you go. Well, no, let's see. Well, can we? It's really not. Can we make that bigger?
That looks better from this side.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit better. It may
Yeah.
not be really
Thank
that
you.
big. So basically, that's what I want you to see. And then while we're on this page, I'll be talking about the back of the building, which is the third row right here. That's the south facade. And what we've done here is we've added two corner features, right here and here. We've added two windows on each corner, and we've added an architectural element that sort of mimics the front. We've wrapped around a little cornice there to give that some interest. You know, the back of a grocery store, as you probably know, is really for service purposes. It's a loading dock. You know, there are dumpsters. There's a generator, and the Publix, and I think most grocery stores would agree, they don't want light coming in because light contributes to quicker spoilage of their inventory. It also would make their refrigeration units have to work harder to keep things cold. So they really don't want light coming back there. And honestly, given the distance from the public street and the fact that you've got tree conservation and a stormwater pond intervening there, it's not super visible. So the other thing I want to show, and it's not super clear here, but there were some exposed equipment. There's some brick walls now that are disguise or screening that mechanical equipment back in the rear. So those are the things we've done in the rear. You asked for a floor plan to show what is going on back there, and unfortunately, Publix was not willing to share their floor plan. The one thing that we could provide is a sort of prototypical. The back 30 feet it's not open to the storeroom. It's filled with freezers, pallet and storage racks, inventory, stock, baler, electrical room. So it's all equipment and storage. There's no employee activity. There's an employee lounge, but it's not back there. So again, someone had suggested skylights that might drop some light down to, so for the employees to use, or skylights or maybe lights at the top of the rear would bring some light in, but that area is not really used for anything but equipment and storage. So on the south side, as we told you before, the back side of a grocery store typically does not have windows. It's storage area, loading docks, utility infrastructure. It's several hundred feet, over 300, almost 400 in one point. Large intervening tree conservation areas and stormwater pond significantly decrease the visibility from the public right-of-way. What we have done is we've added 4 windows on those 2 corners, 2 corner features to mimic the front elevation. We've added the brick walls to screen the mechanical areas. And again, we want to stress the significant distance between the street and the back. And I'm going to show you a couple of perspectives. Okay, this is the view from Timberfield Way at the back of the building. And this is with landscaping in with 5-year maturity. And you really can't see that much of the building. You can see a little bit of that little corner thing there. You see little pieces of the building, but not much. And then I think I have another one that shows from a different place. Yeah, that one is intended to give you a little bit better view if you can, your view between this landscaping here and landscaping here. You can see that corner, but it's not really very visible. And from this point, that's 372 feet from the street. So that's a long distance for a person to see. So next, I'm going to get Carla Casabaum to come up and go through a presentation that she's going to show you all the letters that are on the little maps. Did you just get those? Did y'all get the maps showing the distances? Yeah. So all those letters represent like if you were standing in that place. And she's going to show you a presentation which can kind of give you what you would see if you were standing there. Carla. So go to the wheel.
Let's go.
That's your starting point.
My name is Carla Casabaum with Harris Development Partners, and we are assisting Halverson Development on this development.
I just need to swear you in real quick. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. So, as Isabel has mentioned, we've taken into consideration the need and desire that you guys had to be able to see more of a perspective of what is a pedestrian or a motorist going to see. And we understand that what we presented last time, that was a little bit of a challenge to be able to see what really was the view. So hopefully this will give you a little bit better idea. What is depicted here is elevations and landscaping that's currently on our plans. And so obviously, we're still in process of our ASR, so it's subject to changes that might happen, but this is representative of what we currently have. We'll start up at the top. This B here is what's going to be seen from a motorist on Buffalo Road. And before I go in there, to further emphasize of what Isabel was mentioning, we have tree save area here. We have it here, we have it here, here, here. All around here is tree save area. So I don't think any of these pictures that I'm going to show you really, if we would have put a perspective right too close to that, you wouldn't have seen anything. So just understand that none of these really are depicting the tree save area. So that would be in addition to what you are seeing. So at this location here at Buffalo Road, this is the elevation that what you would see. As you can see, it's just a very small amount of the grocery store. This is with a 3-year plant maturity. At 5-year plant maturity, then you see very little of the public store. Moving a little bit closer to A here, this is now on the multi-use path that is there. And a pedestrian is going to see a little bit more. And still not a lot of the center, but a little bit. The front doors of the Publix is right there. So you can kind of see a little bit of the transparency back behind there. But again, we're over 500 feet away. At 5-year plant maturity, then we just basically see the sign, even as a pedestrian. Moving into the center, here now, this perspective is at C, where we're in the parking lot. And this is a 3-year plant maturity. And of course, we aren't showing really cars here, but you obviously would have cars as well. And so you can see here we have, this is all transparency windows that are provided. All of those are transparent. And then the extra added spandrel glass windows that a little bit harder to see, but they're over here, as well as the backlit spandrel glass. The spandrel glass up above was there previously, but we've added the backlighting. At 5 years, very similar, but you can still see the transparency even at 5 years. Moving over to Timberfield Way. This is at this roadway of D that you see. This is at 3-year plant maturity. So you've got the spandrel glass that you see here. Of course, you've got it up above that still creates that visual interest. Obviously, below we still have the transparency, but it's a little bit blocked by some of the trees. At 5-year maturity, actually gives a little bit more visibility to the transparency, as you can see. As we move to E, this is now at the western side of the shopping center. This obviously is what you're looking at is building 2. And so you don't see a lot of obviously the Publix, but it just gives you a little bit of an idea of, from that perspective, if you're coming in from the shopping center, what you're seeing as a whole. Moving over to F on the eastern side. What we have over here, and I know this was something that was not able to be seen, over here is the pharmacy window. So that's on the eastern side of the building. Here there is 2 spandrel glass windows. You just can only see one given the column. Then we of course have over here our outdoor dining, and then the rest of the windows are a little bit harder on that view to see. This is a 3-year plant maturity. Moving in a little bit at G, we can see a little bit more. You can see here to the left of your screen the spandrel glass, and then the transparency windows, and then to the right, trees are a little bit blocking some of the spandrel glass. Moving up, H, we're a little bit further into the parking lot. Here you can see, of course, the spandrel glass, the transparency. You get a little bit better view as a whole of what we'd be looking at. I is further up, even more so. That gives you a little bit better view of the whole front of the Publix as a whole. So what you can't see as much is, of course, right there is the outdoor dining area, but you can see all of the spandrel and the transparency across the bottom, as well as the backlit spandrel glass at the top. Now this is actually, disregard that it says J, it's actually K. So it's the perspective of where K is. We're on this side. It gives you a little bit closer viewpoint. And these areas right here, this is actually, I know there was a comment and question before is whether or not we can have transparent windows where the deli is indoor and seating is. And that's actually where the indoor eating area is. So those are provided. And then, of course, we have the additional spandrel glass to the right. Now, this says it's K, but it's actually a perspective of J. So if you look up here at J, this one gives you a little bit better view of just as a whole across the front of Publix. So again, a good view of all the windows, whether they're transparent or the spandrel. Adds a lot of visual interest as well. To the back, L. This is, you'll see just a hair of the tree save area off to the left side. But first, to kind of give you an idea of what, want to show kind of what some of the landscaping is that we have in that area. So this picture, it'll clear up, I think, here. There we go. L is, what we have here is there's 2 different types of trees. And one of them is the Nellie Stevens holly. That's this larger symbol here. And they're going to have a mature height of 25 to 35 feet. And the smaller one is sweet olives, and they're going to have a mature height of 6 to 10 feet. So here's our sweet olive right here. And then this is the holly. And so from this perspective, you're going to see there's like 5 of the sweet holly and 4 of the sweet olive and 4 of the holly. So here's our sweet olive and then our holly here. And this is at a plant maturity of 3 years. As you can see, what really stands out is our corner features that we've added that are right there on the ends. that certainly we wanted to. I know you guys had mentioned that the east or the sides of the Publix were fine, but we wanted to wrap that feature around just to have it be a full corner feature. So what we've added is rather than, I think there's just ephes there, we've added a change of material, added 2 spandrel glass windows on each corner, plus a cornice that wraps around the building. It doesn't show on this picture, but will later. That change of materials we also added to the sides as well. So it truly has like a corner feature. This is that same location at 5 years. So again, very little as a motorist driving by as to what they would see. They would see that corner feature, but there's not a lot of other that they would see in the back. And again, this is almost 400 feet away. Back over here, this is at Forestville and Timberfield. This is like one area that you have an opening. As you can see here on our landscape plan, there we go. This is one of the areas where you've got more of a view corridor because you don't have it completely blocked by a lot of trees. There's obviously trees here, but again, these same trees that we had previously are the sweet olive and the holly. Same mature heights. This is at 3 years. So, and this is almost at that intersection. So again, the majority of the back, there's a lot of screening, but you see this corner feature. And as you can see right in this area here, I'll clear that off, but that is where we've added that change of materials. So that way, that whole corner feature, when someone's in that location, they're not just seeing it just, on the back, but they're seeing that it's wrapped around and it's meant for the entire corner. This is at 5 year, so the corner feature is still there. That's predominantly what you see in that view corridor, but the rest of it is very shielded. The last perspective is here. This is going to be not a motorist, but a pedestrian standing on that multi-use path. Same materials, the tree species that we have across. However, if you look up here, there's 2 kinds that we have along the front that are directly behind the Publix building. And that is Chindo, that has a mature height of 12 to 15 feet. And then the Green Giants have a mature height of 40 feet. So I'll show what these are. So what you're seeing, this is someone standing on the multi-use path. This is at 3-year maturity. These across here are going to be 40 feet at maturity, but obviously right at this point at 3 years, they got a bit to go. That'll probably take about 15, 20 years. And then this is at 5 years. So in just 5 years, you're able to see that corner feature, but the rest of the building, for the most part, is screened.
Thanks, Carla. So I think, that gives you a good view of what this building is going to look like and what the views are going to be. I think it's important, though, to focus we've shown you a lot of different views, including some from within the parking lot. We really wanted you to see what the building's going to look like, so you'd have a feel for it. But the real requirement here is from the street. And so the only thing that's really relevant here is our views from Buffalo and views from Timberfield. And we showed you several views on the south side and a couple of views up on Buffalo. And I can go back and recount those if you think that's necessary. But I think those are really the critical views, are what can you really see if you're on the public street? And, once the landscaping goes in, the answer is really not all that much, because you've got a significant distance and you've got substantial landscaping. So the intent here is to provide visual interest for pedestrians and occupants. So we have to say, well, they're not going to be able to see very much. But we think we've put a lot of different elements into the architecture, a lot of architectural elements, articulations, material changes, color changes, and a lot of landscaping. This is basically functioning as one inline shopping center, and we're asking you to understand and appreciate the sort of necessary functions to provide particularly a grocery business. You've got to have sort of that back wall that is not going to be full of, see-through windows and with lots of visual. It's kind of like a service. It's not kind of like, it is a service, heavy on the service, that side of the building, with the mechanical elements, the loading dock, et cetera. But we have added those two corner features, which are going to probably be among the more visible elements from that road wrapping around the back. And we have added some backlighting on the front. We've added some spandrel glass on the really on both sides. And I had a number which I didn't tell you, but when we go back to our, if I can get back all the way to our elevations, I think I can. That's probably not going to be worth the time, but we added 248 square feet of spandrel glass on the front, and additional 80 feet on the back. And those are in the little grids that are with the elevations that we showed. I don't know if it's worth your time for me to try to find those, but I did want to make you aware that we think that is, obviously it doesn't count towards transparency, but we think it does go towards trying to satisfy the visual interest criteria. So I think that's really all we have now, but both Carl and I are available for any questions that y'all might have. If you want to circle back and look at one of these pictures again, we're happy to try to find it.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation and coming back to the commission.
Thank you.
At this time, is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak to this case? Hearing none, I'll ask my commission members if they have any questions for the applicant before we close this hearing for deliberation.
I have a quick question. I think what we have in our packet maybe is the old documents, because it's on the planting plan that we have, it's showing crepe myrtles instead of the evergreens. I just wanted to make sure that that's correct.
Yeah, there was a change to those materials, and we just resubmitted our ASR Sunday night. So that may not have updated yet.
Okay, so just to be clear, what we have as evidence here is not what is shown in the presentation?
It sounds like it. Okay. Yeah, you guys may not.
I think so.
Updated.
My question was
Yeah.
about grading and discrepancies between the perspectives and the
Yes.
and
Because
the,
the spandrel on the back, on the south elevation, don't show up either.
Yeah.
In our packet.
and the perspectives show like a berm at the far side of the stormwater pond that doesn't show up on the grading plan. All right, thank you.
But yes, that was some changes that we made to the landscaping.
But I think the perspective is the most current. Would you agree?
This perspective, yes, that is correct.
Catherine, how do we do that? Which one do we consider as evidence?
Well, it should be the most current site plan because these are tied to the site plan. So I think you can get the applicant's consent or acknowledgement on the record that what they showed you today is the most recent current one.
Yeah. Okay.
And
so,
then and that would be the operative one that you're working off of for your decision today.
so basically, when we have a discrepancy between what we see on the plans and the presentation that you show us, it sounds like we need to get your confirmation that what we see on the presentation is
what you're proposing for your design alternate application.
accurate. Yeah. And the other plans are subordinate.
Right. You've updated and amended what you previously submitted with these plans.
Okay. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions from the commission at this time?
Hi. My only question is I got here at about 4:53. I want to ask the applicant if it's acceptable that I vote here or no. Did I miss
You feel
it?
like you got a flavor for it?
I
Sure.
did. I did, but that's your call.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Any other questions? Hearing no additional questions or presentations of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. If based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. All right, anybody want to start this off?
I think the concern that I probably pushed the hardest back in September was the floor plan, right? I think we all sort of have that assumption that the back of the grocery store is where storage is and things like that. So we could assume it, but needing something to show us that was the intent. I don't know that I quite understand why a sample floor plan can't be provided, but they did acknowledge on the record here that space is allotted for storage and freezers and things like that. So I think that satisfies to a large extent what I was looking for.
I feel like I remember the discussion about the outdoor seating and kind of breaking up the blank wall, that we talked a little bit about the left side of the door too. And it looks like there's not any spandrel glass added there. I guess I'm wondering do you guys remember that to have been an issue?
I think Corey had talked about the fact that there was no connection between the outdoor seating and the indoor cafe, but from what I got in this meeting, it looked like the cafe was separate from where the outdoor seating is. And in that case, kind of makes it a little bit of a moot point to have transparency between the two. I think I kind of remember what you're talking about, but not clearly. I think the biggest thing that I'm struggling with with the perspectives, I really appreciate all the perspectives and the added detail. I know that probably took quite a bit of effort to add that to the package. I just don't have a grading plan that reflects the perspectives across the stormwater pond, just because it looks like there's a berm in those perspectives, but the only grading plan that I have to look at is not showing a berm and showing different plantings. So we'll maybe have to get back to that one.
Mr. Chair, can I just
Oh, well,
comment?
we'll open it up when we're
Okay.
finished. Thank you.
I don't understand what your concern is about the grading plan.
Oh, well, if there's no berm, if there isn't a berm, then the visibility will be different because the plants will be lower.
So I know we've got this is off the old packet, but
Yeah.
so from what I'm seeing in the grading plan, and this is on page 27 of the materials, if we're down near Forestville Road, you've got a road elevation of about 294, and then that berm does step up a couple of feet to approximately 298, depending on where you're standing on that back.
Oh yeah, closer to the intersection.
Closer to the
it's
intersection.
further down.
Yeah.
That may be what it. That may
if
be
you're
what it
right
is.
at the intersection, again, you have the tree conservation area, but you're also stepping up as high as
Yeah.
304, 306 in some of those areas. So you're roughly 8 to 10 feet above the roadway.
Yeah. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Let's see.
From a planting perspective, I appreciate the change in species. I feel like it's still a little sparse. If there was just some more plant material in there, I think it'd be totally fine.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure there's a good reason not to add that. Where I'm at.
Are you talking about
Sorry, on the south side. Yeah.
of
by
the stormwater pond?
South of the stormwater pond,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it does more good there than over on the other side. I certainly appreciate the added corner elements, even though they're spandrel glass. I think that's probably okay. I think Corey's ask for transoms was more for the interior occupants, but on that side, knowing that it's mostly storage and freezers, it's probably going to do minimal good.
There's
So.
not.
Yep. Any other thoughts at this time? I can open it back up if we're done for now. All right. I'd like to open this hearing back up for questions from the applicant.
We just wanted to we had a conversation with our engineer right before the meeting about the grades, and he basically said, you know, you're right on that corner. There's a little bit of different grade, but for the most part along Timberfield, there's not really that much grade change.
Yeah.
So it may be 2 feet here, but then you walk down a little bit, it's none. So it's really pretty consistent.
Yeah. Well, I certainly, the perspective seems to meet the intent. And if you all were willing to ensure that there was a berm there and adequate plantings, I think that would really satisfy this issue.
Yeah. I can let Carla speak to that. But I do want to say that, you know, I think we've shown some pretty good plantings in the perspectives. And this is really a transparency question. So it's not, and the landscaping does screen the building, so you can't see the transparency. So I think it's important, but it's not really a landscaping plan review. It's a
Yeah, it's really just in lieu of not having transparency along that whole back, we're looking to have a full vegetative
Sure.
screen. And if you can do it with the berm and the vegetation, I think that's great. That's really what we're looking for, and we really appreciate that you put those corner elements on there that you know you can't screen.
Excellent. Well, I was going to say, just if I could pull up this, and I apologize, we don't have a grading plan there, but I'll use this. So I'm looking at the grading plan right now. So for example, out here, in the roadway, you've got like 296, and 296 stays up there. But then here, in the center of the road, you got 294. I mean, how the elevations, the grades change, and where the low spots are in the road. Then it acts like a berm. So, for example, I've got, hold on here. This area, my crude drawing here, about there is at 294, which is where this perspective is. However, the grade above that is about 296. Sorry, that didn't
Yeah.
mean to.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
yeah, there certainly is that. That being said, just across the board, there is such a difference in the elevation that, like out here, it's about 300. Like I said, here's 294. Here's about 297. Then you're up here 290. It's 290. I mean, it varies. You're at 284 up here. You're at 290 there, and you're at 296 up there.
Yeah,
you're
I
at
think-
314. So and so what the engineer had indicated is, regardless of how much the grade changed, when you take into consideration the distance, that the vertical, the feet that changes, it's not much of a helper.
Yeah, it's pretty
just
flat.
because it's pretty flat. Yeah.
Yep. So that, I think, is where so looking at the perspectives that you talked about to the right of this plan, the road is lower, but it goes up as you get towards L. So
Correct.
because it's pretty flat, I think a berm along that side would be useful. If you all were willing to add a foot or two, I think that would take care of this issue, because then that 3-year planting would really screen that. If it's something you all were amenable to, I think that would be an easy way to move this forward.
Are you meaning all the way across the back? Because in some areas
Just where
it is
the
like
stormwater control measure is.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think presently, and if I go back to L, because I think L is maybe the area that it is not. I think there's a little bit of both. In some, because of the grades, there is already naturally one.
Yeah.
But and so you're saying in maybe the other areas that there is not
Yeah,
that
as you
2-foot
move.
difference to maybe make a 2-foot difference across the back.
Yeah, so as you move into the site, you lose your low elevation visibility gain.
Sorry, I'm trying to get to L, this one. So this is the one that probably is a little bit lower. That obviously doesn't have as much of a berm in that location. So
Correct.
that would be kind of what you're thinking is in that area.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and it probably would be relatively easy to do it across that whole length of the stormwater pond, unless there were some utilities in the way or something. Obviously, that wouldn't make sense.
Is the berm, if you will, grade change that's shown, and sorry, it's a little slow there, that's shown here, because that's about a 2-foot difference.
that's about
Is
2
that
feet.
sufficient?
I would say if you could get a 3-foot elevation between whatever the finished grade of the road is, that would just be an easy way to do that. So maybe it's 6 inches in some places, whatever's relative
So
to the
Are you
grade.
tying it to a specific elevation, like we want this area that runs along the stormwater pond to be 296?
No, what we could do, an easy way to do this is we could say, if the top of the berm between the stormwater pond and the road was 3 feet higher than the elevation at the center of the road in cross section, then that would allow the engineers to kind of easily
Gotcha.
design
So
that.
whatever the center of the road is, just make sure it's 3 feet above.
Higher than that.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that at the, I'm assuming just at the top of the stormwater pond?
Yeah, just along the space between the stormwater pond and the road, anywhere in there.
I
That
think we
should-
can accommodate that.
Yeah, should be easy.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Thank you.
You bet.
At this time, I will close this hearing for deliberation. Anybody else have any thoughts? I think they've done a great job to meet these, and I appreciate their additional help with the grading. I'd make a motion to approve with that condition.
I'm sorry, I was
go
just going to add one thing to your question about the floor plan. That is actually, the floor plan, the line that's drawn is literal, depicted of exactly where that line is of that entire 30 feet. So even though, unfortunately, we weren't able to show that, it is, there's just balers and pallet storage containers and janitorial and all that that's back there.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine, do you have wording on that? Are you? Okay.
Didn't you say that it would be for the entire length between the stormwater pond and Timberfield Way?
Correct.
But even the Timberfield wraps all around, would it also
No,
include?
it's just for the
Non-tree-
adjacency to the stormwater pond.
Yeah, but how about the tree conservation
Nope.
areas?
Yeah,
So
just
it
the,
would
you
run
could-
between the, but how
yeah.
about the tree conservation
Nope.
areas?
Yeah,
So
just
it
the,
would
you
run
could-
between the 2 tree conservation areas adjacent to the pond?
I think if you just said along the south side of stormwater control measure A,
yes.
which limits you to between, it effectively is between those two tree conservation.
Yeah.
Got it.
And the elevation at the top of the berm shall be at least 3 feet higher than the center elevation of Timberfield Road.
Yeah, sure. I think that'll get it. The relative cross section. If you made a cross section, whatever the elevation.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat the whole thing. So Timberfield Road cross section, would that be a
Yeah.
better way to say it?
Yeah.
Okay, here's what I have. A berm shall be installed in the area between the south side of stormwater control measure A, parentheses, the stormwater pond in Timberfield Way. The elevation at the top of the berm shall be at least 3 feet higher than the center elevation of the Timberfield Road cross-section.
Yeah, I think that works.
Question I have is, do we need to specify the top of the berm is at the pond versus like the multi-use path, or if that's
It can be anywhere between the top of the stormwater pond and the multi-use path. Yeah, I think that works.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve with the condition as described by Catherine.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with the right to such notice following adoption of the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We will now open the second evidentiary hearing for item DA 14, 2022 on today's agenda. I'll ask Daniel Stegall to introduce this hearing.
Pardon me, I'm trying to get to the slide. Thank you for your patience. Next request is DA-14, 2022 at 3002 Leland Drive for Popeyes. So this design alternate request, this is a hearing that was also continued from September 1st, Parents Commission meeting. The subject property, again, is located at 3002 Leland Drive, at the southwest corner of Lewisburg Road and Leland Drive. The property zone is commercial mixed use. That's CX3 park with a parkway frontage, conditional use. The Popeyes project is proposing a general building type for a restaurant with a drive-through. The property has frontage along Lewisburg Road, Leland Drive, and Caliber Woods Drive. The applicant is requesting two design alternates related to transparency. The request for relief from the required transparency on the southeast facade facing Caliber Woods Drive, and to reduce the transparency requirements on the northeast facade facing Leland Drive. Do you all have any questions for staff on this one?
Thank you for the introduction. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of this request. Any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards. Please keep your presentation brief and directly relevant to the design alternate request.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walters, members of the Appearance Commission. My name's Samuel Morris. I'm a lawyer with Longleaf Law Partners, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, here on behalf of the applicant and development team. I'm also joined by Brian Soltz, managing partner with Commercial Site Design, a local engineering and surveying firm that's spearheading this project, as well as Harold Queen with Revision Group, who's also helping to facilitate this development. We're here today requesting 2 modest design alternates related to the UDO's ground floor transparency provisions in order to allow the development of a Popeyes at 3002 Leland Drive in a way that meets the spirit and intent of the transparency requirements, but recognizes the difficulties of designing this type of building, this type of business in a way that meets those technical transparency requirements. Specifically, we're requesting complete relief from the transparency requirements on the rear elevation of the building based on the impracticality of putting transparent glazing at that rear portion of the building where the kitchen, cooler, wet area, and back of house type uses are located. We're also requesting partial relief in the form of 40.2 square feet between 10 and 12 and 2.7 between 3 and 8 on the northeast side elevation, just looking for a minor reduction in transparency there, again driven by the location of back of house uses, but as you'll see in a moment, we've included some spandrel and other things to offset that reduction of transparency. Here's a quick site overview. I appreciate Daniel's quick kind of summary, but I'll go a little bit further in the detail. This is 3002 Leland Drive. It's a 7-acre commercially zoned lot located along Lewisburg Road in the northeast area of Raleigh. As you can see, the parcel has frontage on Leland Drive, Caliber Woods Drive, and Lewisburg Road. The proposed Popeyes building will be located in this northwestern portion of the 7-acre lot, kind of mostly tucked back and away from Leland Drive and Caliber Woods. And most of the existing tree buffer along Lewisburg Road and that western portion of the property will be maintained. I apologize, this isn't the most up-to-date aerial, but you'll see in a moment on the survey, there's actually there's a car wash that's now located right there. And this is a Mexican restaurant right here. And again, the proposed building is approximately right there. So yeah, here's the survey to give you a better idea. You can see the site plan here showing the proposed Popeyes building. There's substantial buffering along both Lewisburg Road and the western portion of the property. There's 2 existing buildings, like I pointed out earlier, located between Leland Drive and the existing building. Set back approximately 300-ish feet from both Leland Drive and Caliber Woods Drive. And on the Caliber Woods side, you see a pad here, which is poised for future development as well. All of that to show you that the building is, substantially set back, tucked away from those public right-of-ways. Here's a closer-up survey of the Popeyes building, just kind of showing the drive-through and basic layout. It will include a split-lane drive-through with the kind of front of the building being oriented right there. So our first design alternate request is complete relief on the rear portion of the building, where the UDO would ordinarily require around 150 feet of transparency based on the size of this elevation. We're asking for complete relief so that we do not have to put any transparency on this rear portion of the building. I'll just show you a quick elevation drawing that we have of this rear portion. Again, the options for including transparency back here are extremely limited based on the back of house uses. We'll show you the interior layout in just a moment to justify that. And as you can see here as well, I'm sorry if I can't find the exact line, but essentially the parapet wall runs about right there too. So all of this area above that isn't really available either. Sorry. Here's the interior layout of the building. Right now we're on this side. As you can see, you have a freezer here, coolers, there. You do have a doorway into and out of the rear portion of the building right there, fryers, and then other back of house uses over there. When we're talking about transparency, we're pretty much looking exclusively at this area right here. Which of course is the location of coolers and freezers, and as you just heard, including windows are not only impractical, but it's not desirable for purposes of spoilage. You have energy efficiency for coolers and freezers and the like. So that's what's driving the request for complete transparency on that or complete relief from the transparency requirements on that southeast rear portion. To give you a look at kind of from the ground what this looks like, this is the site from Caliber Woods Drive. This is the pad I mentioned right here. That's, we'll eventually have something located there, and you can imagine that, you're going to have a building like that. The Popeyes itself will be, located back on this rear portion of the property, so pretty substantially set back. And you have, of course, elm trees lining the street already. And in a moment, we'll show you the pretty substantial landscaping plan that we, in addition to all, as you can see, quite a bit of existing landscaping, that we'll be adding quite a bit as well to create visual interest and essentially, create a multi-layered, in addition to the future building that will be located there, multi-layered kind of green filter, as you look towards that building. And here's just another angle kind of looking, as you can see, there's that wide sidewalk there, and this is the view from Caliber Woods. Once again, you're going to have your Popeyes is going to be back over here. You're going to have a building over here eventually, and we'll show you the additional trees that we'll be placing around the property soon as part of this development. Here's a black and white of the landscaping plan. The kind of grayer trees are ones that are already existing, and the darker ones are ones that we're going to add. We'll be adding Japanese Zelkova and Princeton elms, which are deciduous trees that will be planted at 10 feet and grow very high, up 40, 50 feet. We will also be including some evergreen trees as well that will be planted around 2 feet, but are used as sort of hedge plants and can grow up to 8-ish feet in height. Here's a next slide. Gives you a little better visual of the amount of tree coverage that you're going to have on this lot, and about, like I said, the multiple layers of greenery that are going to exist between the public right-of-way and the building itself. Most of these are deciduous trees, whether they're those Princeton elms or those Japanese Zelkovas. And then additionally on this backside, there is some evergreens planned to be planted along the rear portion of the building. Those are those evergreen trees. I have the exact name. Yeah, the Burford hollies. They'll be planted around 24 inches, but grow up to 8 feet by 8 feet, essentially creating they're a hedge plant, essentially. So to plant 2 of those along the back portion of the area where we're going to be lacking the transparency, to create kind of a green hedge there, and add to an additional layer of greenery to kind of screen that view of the building. So collectively, with regards to this rear portion of the building, we think that the standards for the requested design alternate are met. The requested design alternate is, we believe, overall consistent with the intent of the transparency requirements, understanding the limitations of providing glazing on this portion of the building, given the fact that it is a fast food restaurant, and a substantial portion in that entire area of the building will be used for non-public facing back of house operations. As I'll point out further in a moment, that those portions of the property or of the building, that are public facing are almost entirely transparent. We've concentrated our transparency in the dining area, which is what you would typically see. And so we've kind of allocated the transparency into those areas, understanding that there's just not really feasible to place them on the rear portion of the building. That's in addition to the substantial setback from the right-of-way, and the inclusion of differentiation of materials, and of course the added landscaping. And that rolls into the second requirement, which is that the facade utilizes other architectural, artistic, or landscaping treatments to create visual interest. We believe that the substantial landscaping, the setbacks, the inclusion of those hollies collectively creates a landscape of visual interest that offsets the lack of transparency. That rear elevation it's a narrow, I'm not sure most of us have been on the rear portion of a fast food restaurant. It's, a pretty narrow building face. And so by including all of this greenery, we believe that it substantially offsets the lack of transparency on that side. Moving to our next design alternate request is for partial relief from the transparency requirements on the northeast side elevation, which is kind of the what we'll call the front of the building. As you approach, that's going to be the side that probably has a sign on it, and that you can see the dining area. But for similar reasons, there are pretty substantial portions of that elevation that aren't feasible for glazing. So the request we're making is for 40.2 square feet reduction between 0 and 12 feet, and that correlates to a 2.7 square foot reduction between 3 and 8 feet. Here's a elevation drawing. The sign is sort of schematic, but just to give you an idea that there will be some signage, on the building to kind of break up that blank wall. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got the dining area over here, and we've concentrated the majority of the glass in that area where people are going to be sitting, eating, and approaching the building. These rear portions of the building, as you'll see in just a moment, are those that correspond to whether it's the cash register, I believe, and then all of the back of house uses here. Understanding we can't put actual glazing there, that's why we've included the spandrel. You've got 4 20 square foot spandrel panes on that side to create some visual interest and break up that blank wall on the left side of the building that, in addition to the brick, the sign, the glass, all creates what we believe is a pretty healthy diversity of materials along this elevation. Here's the interior layout again, but this time we'll focus on this area. Like I said, this is all glass here. This is the dining area. That's pretty typical. That's what you see on these types of buildings. That's where you want to concentrate the glass. Again, freezer area here. These are fryers and cooking area. And then this is, as you kind of move forward, you've got the cash registers up here. So all of these are, again, back of house uses where it's neither particularly desirable or feasible to put actual glazing. So here's a look from Leland Drive. This is the Mexican restaurant I mentioned. This is the new car wash. And, our Popeyes is going to be back here like that somewhere. That just shows you that, again, substantially set back. There's quite a few existing trees. You have existing businesses, all of that creating a diversity of a visual landscape as you're driving by. You don't look over there and you're not going to see a big blank wall. You're going to see lots of trees, and you might see the Popeyes kind of poking out from behind. And here's, again, the landscaping plan just for reference. We were just standing there earlier, kind of looking in at that drive. So landscaping, there's, of course, you just saw all those existing trees there, the kind of lighter shaded ones. But these darker ones here, we're going to be adding islands of new trees. Those will be those Japanese zelkovas. And except for actually this one will be an elm. So adding basically another layer of filtration and visual interest in addition to all those trees that are already existing. To give you a better idea, we'll pull this up again. Yeah, just showing you that there's pretty dense landscape of greenery looking from the right-of-way towards the Popeyes. Okay, and so for the similar reasons, we think that the transparency design alternate requirements are met for this northeast elevation. Again, you have those practical limitations with regards to the back of house uses on this rear portion of the property where we're only able to put that spandrel glass, which are, of course, non-public facing areas. And those areas that are public facing, we've concentrated as much transparency and visual interest or glass as we can. There, again, understanding that we're 300 or more feet away from the public right-of-way. You have 2 existing businesses that have their own materials, their own landscaping. All of that, we believe, brings it into consistency with the transparency requirements. And of course, we do, for all pretty much the same reasons, that we do utilize those additional landscaping and architectural treatments to create visual interest, whether that's the spandrel glass, brick being kind of broken up throughout the building, concentrating that glass at the public-facing portion of the building, as well as including signage and additional landscaping. All of that, we think, collectively creates visual interest and brings this project into as much conformity and as close to the spirit and purpose of the transparency requirements. Whoops. I don't know what I did there. Well, we were kind of at the end, so I guess with that. Okay, here we go. Sorry. I'll just put the overview of the request back up. But otherwise, like I said, we've got Brian and Harold here. Happy to take any questions that you all have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation.
Of course.
Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak to this case? Hearing none, I'll ask my commission members if they have any questions for the applicant before we close this hearing for deliberation. Any questions, thoughts?
I have the same question as last presentation. The landscape plan that I have in my packet doesn't have any plants shown on that south side.
I guess this looks like it's 2 Nellie Stephen hollies.
I'm looking at a different page then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe, it's the same thing where this, we submitted this a while ago and the site plan has been updated. And my understanding is that
it's two evergreen hollies.
Two
right?
evergreen hollies planted along the south elevation. Exactly. And that reflects the most recent version of the site plan. And to the extent that an older version of the site plan is included in your packet.
Gotcha, that must have been what I was looking at.
Any other questions at this time? Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. If, based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. Anybody want to start this one off?
Why was it continued from September?
We lost quorum.
I don't think there was even any discussion on it.
No.
Yeah.
No, we never saw the case.
I think that the floor plans are really helpful to understand really how the function of what's going on inside is kind of determining where they can focus the glass and the transparency that they can do in the spaces that people are actually using. So, talking about that.
Yeah, certainly the eastern northeast facade makes sense, and it looks like they get mitigated with spandrel glass, and you really can't see it from off-site view. I think the only point that I have is that if you look at the kind of one of the primary view sheds as you enter from the south is those 2 Nellie Stephen hollies and a big blank wall, and those Nellie Stephen hollies, they're going to come in shorter than 4 feet, which means they're really just going to be probably 3 feet by 4 feet tall, 3 feet wide by 4 feet tall, and that's like a 30-foot width that they're trying to cover. So you're pretty much just going to be looking for years, going to be looking at a big blank wall in that main, when you come in from the south there. So, that's the only part that doesn't really, it seems like it could be done better, like with a green wall or maybe some tall plantings that are tall at install. I think that's the only thing from a landscape perspective. If they're using landscape to mitigate the lack of any transparency on the back, I wouldn't really care if it was like in the back, but it's actually one of the main views you have if you're coming in from the south side.
Yeah, I think maybe be worth just open back up, see if they'd be willing to entertain an alternative species there.
Mm-hmm.
Or a minimum size at installation or something like that.
Yeah.
Done that before.
Yeah. I think that seems like a good idea. At this point, I'll open up the hearing for additional information from the applicant.
We would be amenable to a condition that those hollies be planted at 6 feet, if that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think it may be, maybe you could, how can we do this really easy? Maybe we could double the number and then double the height, or maybe not, you're not going to find 8 feet. Double the number and get them at 6 feet. I think that'll probably really meet the transparency requirements from the get-go, if you guys be into that.
So 4 hollies at 6 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
6 feet minimum.
Or an equivalent, but we don't need to make it complicated.
Okay. That's good. Okay. That sounds good to us.
Okay. I'll close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. Any other thoughts? Anyone want to make a motion?
Motion approved.
I'll second.
With that.
Well, hold on.
Yeah,
Wait.
with the condition, you might have to help me. Is it on the south side of the building?
Yeah, it's on the southeast face of the building. There's 2 hollies there now. If we can just make the condition to be 4 hollies, but there are also 2 hollies at 4 foot minimum height. If we can make them 4 hollies at 6 foot minimum height, that would be great.
6 feet DBH or 6 feet?
No, that's the 6 foot installation height.
Okay. So, and just holly tree specific enough?
They can just be the species that is already on the plan. They're Nellie Stevens hollies, but
So
they don't
just-
need to change the species.
I just say holly, that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So 4 holly trees shall be installed at a minimum height of 6 feet on the south side of the building, or shall be planted.
Correct. Who was that, Will or Ed? Ed. You want to just say that again with that?
Make a motion to approve based on the condition of 4 hollies at 6 feet height on what side was it?
South.
Please.
Southeast side.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with the right to such notice following adoption of the decision. Thank you. We will now open the third evidentiary hearing for item DA 16, 2022 on today's agenda. I'll ask Daniel Stegall to introduce this hearing, or this case.
Thank you. So this is DA 16-2022. The subject property is located at 6108 Creedmoor Road. The property is zoned commercial mixed use, 3 stories, conditional use. The Creedmoor Road project is proposing a general building type for a self-storage facility with frontage along Creedmoor Road.
Is this the one that's been withdrawn?
No,
No, okay.
no, that was the Harris Teeter on Western Boulevard.
Thank you.
Okay. The applicant is requesting 3 design alternates related to transparency. The requests are to reduce the ground story, the 2nd story, and 3rd story transparency requirements on the western facade of the building facing Creedmoor Road. The general buildings in the CX zoning district are required to have a minimum of 33% transparency on the ground story and 20% transparency on the upper stories. The transparency findings are provided for here for your review.
Thank you. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. Any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards, Just a reminder to please keep your presentation brief and directly relevant to the design alternate requests. Thank you.
Good afternoon or early evening, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Collier Marsh with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street here on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to start by asking that the application, our presentation, the case report, and all supporting materials be accepted into the record.
Thank you.
And we do have a couple of witnesses that will testify if you want to bring them up now or when they come up. It's up.
Why don't we just do it as they come up?
Great.
Thank you.
So as Daniel mentioned, so we have 3 design alternates. This all relates to 6108 Creedmoor Road. For the facade you're looking at right now, a self-storage facility. All right, that's not us.
Yeah, that keeps happening.
I'm in the text now. 1 second. Let me see if I can. How to get back to the presentation?
Side over here to scroll.
Just use the mouse instead. Oh, here you go. That's perfect. I will not click the keyboard at this time. So this slide shows the site and the surrounding area again, 6108 Creedmoor Road. About a 2.3 acre site across from an elementary school. There is some slope. You're moving uphill as you move north on the site, so higher elevations on the northern side of the site than the southern side. And we do have some single family detached neighbors to the rear of the property, to the east of the property. As I'm sure that the commission has observed and folks know, there's been a lot of activity on Creedmoor Road and a lot of transition from former lower density residential uses to growing commercial uses. And Creedmoor Road itself is scheduled to become a 6-lane avenue divided, so a lot of transition going on in this area. The site itself was rezoned about a year ago to CX3CU with only a handful of permitted uses, one of which was the self-storage use, so it was specifically contemplated at that time. So this is the overall site plan for your reference. So it's a 3-story self-storage facility. A couple things to point out here. I don't know if you can see the cursor or not, but in this front corner will be an office location. That is where there's definitely transparency provided as well as parking. What you have in the front, what looks like an entrance on the front facade is a canopy-covered loading area, and the idea there is that you get folks loading in a central location for the storage facility. So that's why that is in that, and these are drive aisles so that people can get as close as possible to the entrance of the building and not have to move things quite so far. So we do have 3 transparency requests today. So they relate to 2 UDO provisions. So the first one, UDO 3.2.5, it has the ground story and then the upper story requirements, the baseline requirements. What it says for ground story is 33% transparency, for upper story, 20% transparency. Then 1.5.9 relates specifically to that ground story, adding a little more definition to what's required there, and that's that 50% of that 33% transparency, so 50% of the required transparency is between 3 and 8 feet. So we're seeking relief from those collectively, and so you see our requests below that, 1, 2, 3, and conveniently lined up with floors 1 through 3. 1 is the ground story. What we're asking for is to go from that 33% overall transparency to 8% overall transparency for that ground story, and then to have 15% of the originally required transparency between 3 and 8 feet. So not 15% of our 8, but 15% of what would have been required by the code. Moving up to floor 2, what we're asking for is 10% transparency instead of 20%. And then to floor 3, we're asking for 3% or 13% transparency instead of 20%. And so these are the findings that we're required to meet. You all are very familiar with them. We're prepared to present competent material and substantial evidence as to each of them, but just to forecast so you understand the context as we're going into it, what we will present is essentially that the intent of the transparency requirements, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes there are uses that, although it applies to every single use, there are uses that don't fit perfectly. And so here, when you're trying to lend visual interest to folks on the interior of the building, That's not actually what users of a self-storage facility want. They want security, they want their stuff safe, and frankly, you don't want to be looking in at a stack of boxes or whatever people are putting in their storage facilities. And so the intent isn't quite met here. Also along Creedmoor Road, scheduled to be a 6-lane divided as that expands. Not a lot of pedestrian traffic going to be there, not a lot of pedestrians walking and seeking to look inside a self-storage facility. So just a little different situation than most buildings, and it's a specific use type that drives that. But as we'll show you, we're using a number of different elements to help offset the reduction in transparency and to achieve visual interest in different ways that are more appropriate for this use. And so to meet those findings, we'll rely on the folks that have designed the building and the plans that are far more qualified than I. So at this point, I'd like to start by calling our first witness, and that is Cleve Pate. So Cleve, if you don't mind coming up and standing by me, and if you come on up, and if you, when you get up here, you could state your name, your address, your education, and experience for the board. I guess start by saying your name, and we'll want to get them sworn in.
Cleve Pate. I'm the project architect. I'm a registered architect in many states. Went to North Carolina State University. I've been doing this in some form since 1987. So,
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
And as Cleve stated at the outset, he's been practicing since 1987, so I'd like to tender him as an expert in architecture and building design.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So Cleve, if you don't mind just telling the Appearance Commission about your role in this project.
I've been the project architect in terms of basically working on coordination. We did layouts for the buildings, elevations, basic construction documents for building permits, which is just typical CD work.
And can you explain then the design goals that you've worked on that are driving these transparency requests?
Yeah. Basically, initially, what we try to do on these is we're looking at two factors, one being security, another one being efficiency as an initial planning process. The security obviously becomes a little bit problematic in terms of, say, too much transparency on the building. Not only, especially at a lower level, but one thing we do look for in terms of that is the security as far as a lot of glass on the building, and then the visual on the building to give patrons the belief that it's a secure building. So that's one thing that kind of limits us a little bit in terms of transparency. The other factor is efficiency. Buildings of this type is very important that we have efficient layout. As you can see on the floor plans, most of our layout is a double loaded corridor. If we end up taking out much on exterior walls, we take out substantial portions of the storage units themselves, which becomes pretty inefficient. So that's one of the reasons we're trying to look for alternative ways to meet the intent of the transparency.
And when I think of transparency for self-storage facilities, I think of a lot of Capitol Boulevard, and there are a lot of faux facades where you actually have like a fake space and then some lighting to meet transparency requirements. Is that something that you evaluated here, and what did you determine?
We did evaluate it as we do in every one of these buildings. One of the things that we try to look for in this is, again, the efficiency factor on it. The other part of this is that during rezoning or the zoning process, that some of the neighbors were a little bit concerned about having too much of the transparency, like a faux aspect where there was a lot of light coming out there from the building. So that's one thing we took into account. The other thing was, from a neighbor standpoint, is that when you do have those type elements on the building, to a great extent, you're basically looking in at storage facilities. So we felt like it was a better solution to do a nice facade with nice materials rather than looking into a service.
So let's explain to the commission exactly what we're providing here. So if you could explain the transparency we're providing, which is shown on the top portion of the slide, and then talk about a little bit more what we're doing with other elements, and just to help orient the commission, the front facade where we're seeking relief is on the top. Those bottom two facades or side facades, transparency isn't required there, but as we'll explain, there is some relevance. So if you could just talk about again what we are providing.
Sure. On the southwest, which is, as you're looking at the right end of the building, that's where the office is, and that's where we did decide to go with some setbacks within the building to do some basically faux areas with aluminum storefront. That goes full 3 stories. When we go to the northwest end of the building, which would be the left as you're looking at the elevation, you can see there's a grade change there which eliminated having glass on the first floor at that area. So what we did was do the same scenario on the left where we added glass aluminum storefront there. In the basically middle part of the building, which is the loading area, that is a glass slider with side lights. It's basically a 14 feet in length piece of glass, basically with the 2 sliders there. We really could not put anything directly above that on the second floor because we have an overhang there, which is the pretty large overhang for loading and unloading for patrons. Then we did go in the 3rd floor. We did have another section of glass up there. Now what we did do is, if you look down at the side elevations, which these were really not required, but we felt like that the best option on this was to do basically tower elements on each end of the building. We would wrap the glass around the corners on each building. So as you're coming down Creedmoor from either way, the first thing you see is really a large expanse of corner glass. And even though the glass on the sides where we wrap the glass doesn't apply technically to our front elevation, we think it does add substantially to the look of the building in terms of transparency.
And so to orient the commission with the numbers you're seeing there, at the top are the transparency that we're providing, that we're seeking relief for. Now at the bottom, Cleve, is it right that what we're showing is, had that window on the side elevation been wrapped on the front, so that extra transparency that's not required, had that provided, is that your transparency calculation for what that would be for a front facade?
That's correct. If we had taken the glazing on the end of the buildings and put it directly on front of the building, it would have changed these numbers substantially to these lower numbers. But we felt like, in terms of how you approach the building on Creedmoor, how you actually see the building, that the corner glass elements were a greater effect.
And now there's a number of other features on this front facade. Again, the image on the top of the slide. Can you explain to the commission all of the other things we're doing to add visual interest on that front facade?
Yeah, what we were trying to do here is, knowing that we were going to be short in terms of transparency on the actual front of the building, we're trying to add interest in terms of articulation, as other people have mentioned before earlier. We do have pretty nice materials on this building. We are outsetting the brick in this to give a look of a pier, which basically is the height of almost the whole first floor. And then, of course, the major brick panels on each side at the towers. We have like an architectural split-face block that is separating the brick. This is a through-color block. We're using a architectural horizontal panel, which is a very nice architectural panel. You're seeing a lot now used on multifamily condos, office buildings. This is like a Kynar finish type horizontal rib panel. We're doing, obviously we're using EFS here. We're using 3 different colors in terms of that to break up the horizontals on the building. So as you go down this building, there's a constant change of shadow lines on the building, of color and materials on it. So we felt like that was something that would offset a lack of some transparency.
All right, so I've flipped to the landscape plan for this site. Could you just explain how this landscaping interacts and affects the visual interest for the site?
Yeah, the landscape, as you see the landscaping plan here, is fairly heavy landscaping. It's basically wrapped around the building. So really almost any view you have the building, you're going to be looking through this landscaping, which is, full height, streetscape trees, a smaller layer of smaller trees and a lot of shrubs. And this is, we do have a lot of masonry on the lower part, so this would soften up the whole building. And in terms of any pedestrians that would be coming through, you'd be basically walking under a tree canopy here. So we feel like that for the 3 stories that are facing Creedmoor, that the landscaping is creating like a buffer in terms, and kind of pulling the building down just a little bit.
All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. So this is a different project, but this is a Fox Road storage project, which I understand you worked on. Can you explain? This is a different process. Just a little over a year ago, the transparency relief that was granted for this project, and how this facade is different than what we're.
Well, offering. if you look at this building, you can see that this building is very, very similar to Creedmoor Road. Same geometric elements, the same materials, so we use the same thing. But in fact, this particular project on Fox Road was a corner site. So we were actually dealing with transparency on 2 elevations, on Carlisle Road and on Fox Road. And actually, Fox Road has a little less transparency than Creedmoor has. So at that time, we, from an administrative alternate, we tried to make the case about transparency and using other elements on the building to offset it, and we were approved on that, I think, in January of '21.
All right, so that's all I have from Cleveland, so I'll just quickly summarize what you all heard, unless you have questions for him right now. Otherwise, we can answer them at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
All right, so again, just kind of orienting y'all with what the required findings are. We've presented competent material and substantial evidence for each of these 2 elements for all 3 requests. Now, item number 1, consistent with the intent of the transparency requirements, it's the same for all 3 requests, and essentially, self-storage is a little different than some of the other uses, and we heard talking about the back of house uses in the prior request, as well as the back of house in the Publix, that we recognize that when there's a storage use, there's not necessarily the same desire for transparency into that storage use. Now, this is a permitted use in the UDO, and the whole thing's storage. So as you saw in the floor layouts that we provided, where we're not able to provide transparency, there's storage directly on the other side of that wall. But if you look back, and I'll flip back just to remind you, anywhere else, and the level 3 shows it pretty well, level 1 shows it too, anywhere else that there's not storage, there is transparency being provided on this facade. With the exception of that grade on the northern side, our office has transparency. We did do a little bit of that faux element to continue those windows up those corners and add that visual interest. And then because we have a loading area on level 1, we were able to obviously provide transparency there, as well as on level 3, we offset it a little bit to add another window to just add more. But to add transparency and to create that faux appearance across the whole building is frankly inefficient. It's wasteful, and it's also something that was not desired by the neighborhood through the rezoning process, an explicit concern that they raised. So it's not a one-size-fits-all transparency requirement. This is a perfect example of why we have design alternates. There are only a handful of folks in there at a given time. When they're inside, they want to be in their secure storage environment. If they're in the office, they do have windows. So if you're worried about folks inside, that shouldn't really apply here. On the exterior, not high pedestrian traffic, but we have added landscaping to help to help provide interest for them. Really, what we did was we prioritized, knowing that this is a vehicle corridor, folks approaching pretty quickly. We focused on those corner elements to add visual interest where you're going to see it. And then Cleve went into great detail in item number 2 that he's added a number of different architectural elements, really differentiating materials, not giving you, slight deviations, slight changes in texture, but going above and beyond to add as much visual interest as possible for a self-storage facility. So with that, we have presented competent and material and substantial evidence for all of the elements, for all of the findings. We respectfully request that you vote to approve this, and of course, we've got a number of folks that are here to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak to this case? Hearing none, I'll ask my commission members if they have any questions for the applicant before we close this hearing for deliberation. Any questions?
Just one. There are on the plant schedule. So you've got eastern red cedars, black gums, and Schumered oaks that I think probably offer the most sort of visual screening from Creedmoor Road. I don't see initial plant heights or mature plant heights. Do we have an idea of just?
They're on the 6th row on the plant schedule on page 22.
On which page?
22.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was looking
Oh,
at.
good. Yeah.
I was looking at 20. Okay, never mind. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. If based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. All right, any thoughts from the commission? I think I'd probably just start it off by saying it was a thorough presentation and it seems like a pretty solid case for meeting all of the findings as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think from a landscape perspective, they've done a nice job at choosing plants and sizes that are really going to screen that west side. It's also consistent with the streetscape.
Yeah, I'll add, I appreciate a little bit of the brick, pulling that out a little bit, just spread a tiny bit of articulation.
Yeah.
It's helpful.
I think it's important to know, too, that the neighbors did not want a view into a lit hallway, because I think that helps your case a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking originally of the U-Haul on Capitol. I'm glad Collier brought it up, that they could have done that, but intentionally did not do that because of the neighbors. That's basically what you're saying. Not that you really want to look into windows staring at. It has some effect. Any other thoughts? Anyone want to make a motion?
So I would make the motion to approve as submitted.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with a right to such notice following adoption of the decision. Thank you. Does anybody need a break or anything before we do this last one? Good. Okay. We will now open the fourth evidentiary hearing for item DA 17, 2022 on today's agenda. Daniel Stegall will introduce the case.
Thank you. Our next request is DA-17-2022. The subject property is located approximately at 1717 and 1727 South Saunders Street and 201 Penmark Drive. The property is zoned as commercial mixed use, 40 stories with the urban limited frontage. and is a conditional use. It also contains a shot to overlay. The Downtown South project is proposed as a mixed-use building type, including commercial and residential uses and structured parking. The property has has two frontages on two public streets, South Saunders Streets and Centerline Street. The applicant is requesting two design alternates, a design alternate to reduce ground story transparency on the western facade that's facing South Saunders Street, and a design alternate for relief from the step back requirement along South Saunders Street. Mixed-use buildings in the CX zoning district are required to have a minimum of 50% transparency on the ground story. And the transparency findings are provided here for your reference.
Thank you, Daniel. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. Reminder, any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards, and please keep your presentation brief and directly relevant to the design alternate request. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group. I'd like to begin by requesting that our presentation materials and application materials be admitted to the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll start this evening with some orientation to where we are. This is going to be important to how we think about the frontage along South Saunders in particular. Actually, so I'm not supposed to use the keyboard, right? Yeah. How do I heard that. Yeah, you definitely use the cursor. Just your bar over here. Okay, God. Did I miss one? Okay. Thank you. So just some views from the street today. The existing site is a mix of vacant and industrial use, and you can see particularly in this area, you can see the industrial across the street today. And to zoom in a little bit more on the exact site, the proposal is for a multifamily tower right up on South Saunders Street. And to put this site in context, you can see the site there with a dashed yellow line around it. So it's fronting on South Saunders Street and to be surrounded by an urban grid. So a key aspect of this image is to show that all four sides of this building will face either a private or public street and have pedestrian and vehicular access. So our first request is for complete relief from the 12-foot step back requirement that would otherwise apply here. And you can see the image on the right is the by right massing, including the 12-foot step back all the way around the building. And the proposed massing is on the left. Our request pertains only to that vertical section along South Saunders Street. It's 70 feet wide, and it is paired with much more extensive setbacks on other sides of the building. I'd like to turn now to the standards for evaluating this request. So the first standard is that the approved design alternate is consistent with the intent of the building massing regulations. The intent of these regulations is to manage the impact of the tall buildings located near the public right-of-way and avoid a canyon effect. So making sure there's access to light and air and that there aren't wind impacts. Also to visually reduce the perceived scale of the building. So what you see here is obviously a comparison between what would be permitted and what is requested that I think fairly obviously addresses the concerns for light and air here at this location, particularly when the request is limited to the South Saunders Street facade. South Saunders Street under the Raleigh Street Plan is at least 131 feet wide. I understand there is some discussion of a new turn lane at this location, which may make it even wider at this location. So no light and air concerns at this location, nor wind. This proposal is obviously paired with a much greater than required step back, further addressing those concerns. The next standard is that the approved alternate uses an architectural base distinguishable from the building above, enhancing the pedestrian environment through a change in material, fenestration, ornamentation, rhythm, or other sculpting of the base. And here I will turn, I apologize, the slides are a little out of order here. But here you can see that. You can see that that base is clearly identifiable. The building uses other architectural treatments to mitigate the wind impacts, increase light at the pedestrian level, and visually reduce the scale of the building. And here, the primary means of addressing those issues are those more extreme setbacks. And then the fifth standard is that the building does not cause undue shadow impacts on public spaces, amenity areas, and surrounding streets. Again, bringing down the height, creating larger step backs, and being located on a very wide right-of-way. With that, so this image actually understates the width of the street. The dimensions that you probably can't read here on South Saunders Street total about 120 feet wide. As you heard, that total street right-of-way will be a minimum of 131 feet. So our next request pertains to the transparency requirements. It's very popular this evening. There we go. We'll leave that here. And here I want to kick off the discussion by noting again the intent of the transparency requirements. And here, the intent is to lend visual interest to the street-facing building facades for both pedestrians and building occupants, and to minimize blank wall area. As you saw on an earlier slide, we have several frontages here. Because the focus of this standard is on pedestrians and building occupants, rather than on drivers, for example, our focus here, given that that we have the four frontages and a challenge with transparency on the ground floor in particular, we wanted to make our request along South Saunders Street. Our only request on the transparency is on South Saunders Street, because given this urban street grid, we think that we'll have more pedestrian and building occupant impact on all of the other frontages and not on South Saunders Street. So you can also see, these are a little slow to load. So you can see here, there's no shortage of transparency for the building as a whole. So if you are driving on South Saunders Street, you're still seeing quite a bit of transparency here, not as affected by that ground story level. And again, the standard is focused on those pedestrians and building occupants looking from the street-facing facade here. And with that, I will turn this over. Actually, I'd like to introduce first. I have with me tonight Brian Johnson. He is a licensed North Carolina architect at Klein Design. He has extensive experience in designing mixed-use projects in the Triangle. He has both a Bachelor of Arts in Architectural Studies and a Master of Architecture from Judson University. And I would like to offer him as an expert in building design and architecture.
Brian, could you come to the podium? You state your name and address in relation to the case.
Home address or business address?
Business.
Yes. Brian Johnson with Klein Design, 125 North Harrington Street in Raleigh. What was the last part?
Relation to the case.
Yes, I am the architect of record for this project, the day-to-day project manager, but also overseeing the general design and documentation and administrative approvals of the project.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. You can proceed with your presentation.
I'm scrolling. Okay. We'll come back to the pretty pictures. I'm gonna skip ahead though to we should have a floor plan here to help further orient you to the building. So the South Saunders Street, it would be on the plan west side of this image. The other three streets, as Molly mentioned previously, face the internal sides of the site, which are directly across the street from similar mixed-use buildings that have activated retail levels. really where the primary pedestrian activity is focused, given the seven-lane wide South Saunders Street. As I'm sure you all can appreciate, the challenge of trying to find a back of house on a four-sided building for a myriad of uses is challenging. So the focus was to really activate, as much of the internal sides of this building as we could, with transparency, active uses, retail, which would be all basically the south side. We have vehicular entry into the parking deck, leasing office for the residential, and then additional retail up on the north side. So wrapping basically the three sides, and wrapping the corners as much as feasible with transparency to really activate the pedestrian interest at that ground floor, more internal to the development. I'm going to go back to this slide. Yep, went too far. What you may or may not be able to read as far as the transparency calculations are concerned, but they are included there. In short, on South Saunders Street, what is reflected in this image currently reflects 41% transparency between 0 and 12 feet, and then we are 36% between 3 and 8 feet. So we are close to achieving the 50% requirement, but because of the back of house uses that are lending itself to be located on this elevation, we are falling short of that requirement. You will see also that we have noted green wall and art walls as an alternative to the transparency in the interest of providing that interest to the elevation. What is not reflected there, but if you do the math, if you take the provided transparency plus what we're offering for green wall and art, it does equal the 50% that we would otherwise be offering or required to provide in the transparency. So the goal is to meet the intent, just providing some flexibility for back of house uses along what we're considering to be the least pedestrian friendly elevation of the building. So we do have some renderings here that help better demonstrate the intent, and I don't know that we're proposing the art or the green wall would have to go in these locations. We're flexible if those are better served in other sections of this building, but that graphically reflects the amount of square footage that would be offered to get back to that 50% overall. One of the other things that we are proposing is, let me go back here. As Molly mentioned, bringing the language of the tower down to the street in an effort to both break up the massing of the parking structure, but also get some glazing down to that ground floor. And then where we don't have glazing, really reinforcing the structural grid of that building from above, recessing these panels to, probably better seen on the elevation, recessing the panels so that there's a logical rhythm and to the elevation that reinforces kind of the structural grid of the building, and then further reinforced by, we got frozen, further reinforced by creating a tactile experience where we're proposing some recessed or projected brick courses to really give that ground floor where we do have solid wall a little bit of something more than just a flat surface, so a little bit of interest there. And then again, wrapping the glazing around the corner where we can, which would be at the two corners where we see that as the primary. This really is the front door to the development, so this is where we see the pedestrian activity starting to become a little more predominant than we would probably farther up the block. Go back to that one there.
So we believe our request for the reduced step back or eliminated step back, as well as the ground floor transparency, meet the intent of the UDO, serve the pedestrians, serve the building occupants, and otherwise provide an improved design option for this site. Thank you for considering our request.
Thank you, Molly, for your presentation. It doesn't look like it, but is there anyone here from the public? Seeing none, I'll ask my commission members if they have any questions for the applicant before we close the hearing for deliberation.
I just want to confirm that the 3 panels, is that an entry into the garage, or is that not?
These 3 panels right here?
Yes.
No, that is not an entry into the garage. No, the entries into the garage there's one on the opposing side and then one on the, what's the plan, I guess, left side of that image, the north.
So I had a related question to that, and I think you kind of answered it. My question was, why did you put a green wall on one of the 4 panels? Is there a difference between that one and the others? Do they open, or was it just what I think, which is you were aiming for 50% transparency mitigation?
Correct. Yeah, all those panels are generally the same size, so we picked one just graphically to demonstrate that's what you would need to do to achieve the 50%. I think we have the flexibility to move that, to break it up over a 4 panel. I mean, however that area is addressed.
Yeah, I don't know if it's not really a stated thing, but I don't know that art or green walls are 1-for-1 for transparency. Maybe they are, but I appreciate you at least graphically representing what it would be.
Sure.
Related to that, so yes, I think this gets to the intent of getting to 50% in practice. When this is applied, to Adam's question, do you think you'll be applying that treatment beyond just the panel shown?
Fair question. I think that's open for discussion. Again, I think graphically we're just trying to demonstrate this is what we could commit that would get you to the overall 50%. I think if it becomes an equal amount in all 4 of those panels, that's certainly
certainly aesthetically, it's like the first thing I saw was like, why did you pick that one but not the other 3?
Almost draws more attention to the 3.
Yeah.
Fair. That's fair.
So I'm glad that it's just diagrammatic almost.
I think breaking it up and having some uniformity between the 4 panels visually, I think would be better than what you're representing here.
Yeah.
I get why you did it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, just
you're demonstrating the minimum of what would be required.
Right.
But I imagine you would go beyond what is shown here.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Seems like we're all hovering around one thing. Okay. Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. If, based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. Thank you. Okay, so it seems like we're all hovering around the same thing here.
I'll just say I'm totally there on the building massing. I think it's materially better for how they've designed it. So.
Yeah. I think does everybody agree with that? The step back is the lack of step back.
So I want to make sure I understand that the 12-foot is intended. The way it's written in the UDO is intended to be everywhere along that elevation.
Yeah.
Not an average across the entire elevation. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Daniel's nodding his head. Yeah. So really, it's
just
kind of silly.
But
for this case.
You could have a parking deck, and then it step back, or you could have this. Carried all the way down.
I think that there are multiple benefits, right? There are benefits to the developer in that there's additional, residential units up above that. But I think, for us, being able to bring that facade all the way down the parking deck is visually appealing.
Yeah. So, that makes sense. So I guess my thoughts on the transparency and the graphics here are, because you've got a pretty heavy streetscape planting, the green wall, I feel like well, we may be getting into too many details, but I'd almost rather art along those 4 panels than a green wall. I don't know. I hate to say that as a landscape architect, but I guess I don't know if we even need to, but if there's a convenient way for us to provide guidance so that they know where to move from this, not putting 1 panel of green wall and art in some other place. If anybody has any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just, I like the approach and how they showed it visually here, and maybe just have the condition that we do get back to the intent, to the 50% in some way along that elevation.
I don't know. I don't want to get too hung up on 50% being the,
Yeah.
Okay.
you know, the intent of 50% is to have it be mostly transparent, but
So how do we
on that
say you can do
percentage
something
versus-
different without doing this?
And meet the intent.
And still meet the intent. I see what you're saying, Marcus. It's like, we want you to do something different, and we are obliged to make sure that you meet the 50%. But it's not, we don't have a 1-for-1. There's nowhere that it says it's 1-for-1, right?
So back under the previous system, the alternate for design.
Administrative alternate, yeah.
I believe there was a 1-for-1.
It was 1-for-1. Do you remember, Catherine? Yeah.
Well, here's what I'll say. You know, for as prominent of an edge as this is for this development, I kind of imagine if they didn't have to get a design alternate, that they would be treating those panels. And I get that they're displaying the minimum that they would be required to do, but the type of development this is to me, feels like that they would be treating
gonna do it
those
anyway.
panels regardless. But yeah, I am a little surprised that they're not blank, but
Kind of blank. I mean, from a driver's perspective, it's pretty blank. Kyle, you do stuff like this. Can you?
I'm not personally offended by this. I think there's a nice attempt to break down the scale of this facade along South Saunders. It provides a little visual interest as the driver is passing by. If you're not stopped at a light at 45, it'll catch your eye, but not in a distracting manner, like some of the projects along North Hills with all the glazing at ground level that kind of reflect back in your eyes.
Yeah.
At rush hour, it seems. So I kind of like the breaking up of this and then the massing move to articulate that tower and conceal some of the parking. I also think at the ground level, I'm not sure if the parking extends to that wall, but maybe the consideration that was there to kind of block some of the headlights that could hit the drivers at a perpendicular angle along South Saunders. And I'm fine with this as shown.
Yeah. I think it pretty clearly meets the intent as shown. I think anything we provide is probably just recommendations for, how we might like it. I don't see any way that it's not meeting the intent. What do you think, Will?
no, I'm just gonna say, I think they want it to look good.
They're gonna
too,
make it look
so.
nice. Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
But just to underscore, I do think the way that it's drawn here with having just one
panel,
and then it kind of accentuates the other three, and the fact that they're blank by comparison.
Yeah, so our unofficial recommendation is please don't do that. Otherwise, I'd make a motion to approve as shown.
I'll
As
second.
presented. All in favor?
Aye.
The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with a right to such notice following the adoption of the decision. Thank you for your presentation. That concludes the quasi-judicial portion of this Appearance Commission meeting. So let's take care of the draft minute. Do we have the agenda? Daniel, is the agenda on that presentation? No. Is it just the meeting minutes? Okay, thank you. I took a look at these meeting minutes, and they are lengthy, but they look great. So I would motion to approve as written.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We have a short report from the attorney, I think, attorney's office.
Just about what you asked us earlier. So there was, just to follow up, there was a request to look into having QJ at both of your meetings. That's being internally being discussed. There's a lot of factors that have to be considered. It's not quite as easy as just doing it. So just that's the update for now, is that it's being reviewed. So
Okay, any idea when you'll be able to come back with that to us within
I think,
anything?
I would think probably soon. I mean, within the next, maybe your next meeting, maybe the one next, definitely by your next QJ meeting, I would think.
Okay.
But I don't want to get ahead of the planning department because it's really their call. So.
Okay.
Just catching up, that was our request. In order
Yeah,
to
so
spread out
basically,
the load.
basically we were feeling like we had this, because we don't have any administrative alternates anymore. So our second, one of our meetings is basically, we don't really generally have anything, and that's fine. Maybe we can take care of everything else at that meeting. But we were at the same time feeling like we had a really heavy load on the QJ meetings. Catherine has informed me that we have a very similar load to everyone else that does QJ, so we probably
Start later than you too.
yeah. So we may not have much of a case, but we also need to have quorum. So if we're struggling with quorum because our QJ meetings are so long, then we just have to deal with that. And so this was one of the avenues. Another avenue that we talked about was capping the number of meetings for a QJ. I think we kind of hesitated with that one because it could have a big impact on some of the applicants if they are getting pushed, because it's a pretty long time. So we're trying to avoid impacting applicants and making their wait longer if we just capped it. But by making 2 meetings a month that could see QJ, we basically can just shorten our meetings and still be able to serve the applicants.
And staff's just.
Well, they're discussing internally. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen, I think, behind the scenes. Notice is one. Notice is required under state law to go out a minimum of between 25 and 10 days before the meeting. Mail notice, site posting, web notice. So you would be having those overlap. So like it's a lot to keep. So there's that issue. You have to have a room with recording, which this room is booked at that time that you normally meet. This is the room that has the recording. You have to have, the staff members, the clerk, the attorney, the transportation. You have to have, the written decisions and the filing calendars and all. I mean, it's like everything you're doing now, including the term back of house has been used a lot today. But
yeah.
That, behind the scenes work would have to be, so it's something that a lot of people have to discuss. And there's also the QJ boards, the other 2 that currently meet once a month. So. Yeah.
So the precedent is for once a month. So it's hard. It's probably a tough ask, but it's not one that we can't ask for. Set a precedent. Anyway, that's the update. Other updates, Sir Walter Raleigh Awards are coming up the end of this month. So please reach out to your networks and advertise, just get people to come. Seems like a pretty easy one, but we're looking forward to that event happening.
Is there, sorry, thank you for Sir Walter Raleigh, but going back to the other, is there a way to limit the amount of time that the presenters have on their presentation?
Don't think so.
Here's the issues. Well, I don't think you can set a clock, but you can do what you already are doing, which is saying be as quick as you can.
Nobody
Get to the point. The applicant has a due process right to put on their competent material, substantial evidence. Now, to the extent that they're not talking about a standard or it's not relevant or not, you can stop them. But
can we? Because I was about to say, when she was showing all those perspectives of non-offsite views, I was going to interrupt, but am I allowed to interrupt and say, like, you don't need to show us any of these?
I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not, you got to be, I think you could say, this is not going to, factor into our decision or, or we don't
Yeah.
think it's relevant.
Could you
and-
please go quickly
yeah.
through them or something? Okay.
I mean, I
cool.
would be careful though if somebody's, I wouldn't deny somebody and not let them put on their full
Right,
case.
right. At least, but
It's kind
we
of a
can,
common sense thing.
We can kind of interrupt and say like, hey,
Can we have like a suggested time, like a 10-minute presentation?
Another like visual cue that kind of helped like actual like high school type of presentations from going over. It's like instead of a timer counting down, it just like it shows you how long you've been talking. The timer just counts
Yeah.
up and it lets the speaker keep track of like how long they've actually been talking. Because
Yeah.
sometimes when you're presenting, you don't realize. Yeah.
how long you're going on about
Back in circles a little bit.
details. I do hand gestures like this, hoping that they'll see me. Or
Or
like,
you like tap your leg or your foot. Oh, I noticed that.
all right. Yeah. Did you have something else you wanted to say there? Sorry, I cut you off. All right.
I'll say the BOA chairs that asked the same question too. They have the same, their script is very similar to yours where they say, okay, talk about the variant standards or SGP standards. So it's a,
Okay. Yeah, we're in line. That makes sense. So yeah, Sir Walter's coming up. Spread the news. I think I don't want to say much more about that because it's really we'll find out more when Casey's here about sponsors and stuff like that. But yeah, thank you all for being here tonight. See you next time.